This week on FAS TV, we're taking a look at water quality. Consultant Alec Pirie takes us through all the different considerations facing farmers. Farmer and consultant Robert Ramsey talks us through the benefits the Agri-Environment Scheme has had on his own farm. And we're joined by SEPA for an overview of the difference these kind of improvements make to Scotland's waterways.
Hi there, my name is Alec Pirie. I'm an agricultural consultant working out of the SAC Consulting Office here in Ayrshire. Today we're here at Ayr Beach and we're discussing mitigation of diffuse pollution and the potential benefits of implementing some sustainable water management practices. We're going to hear a little bit about Robert Ramsey's experience with the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme and some of the practices that he's implemented further up the catchment, but just wanted to place it in a broader context. So when we're looking at conservation benefits and the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme, in addressing Scotland's biodiversity crisis, we're really wanting to expand the scope of our activities, look at things at a catchment level, at a landscape scale, and make compounded benefits that are going to impact areas that are further outside the boundaries of the typical farm. So we're really looking to see landscape scale collaboration. We're looking to see multiple factors impacting on one given feature. In this case, we're going to be talking about water margins, water bodies, and ultimately what ends up here at the coast. And we're going to be looking at some of the management practices that you can incorporate. So further up the catchment, you've got your lochs, your lochans, your ponds, your big water bodies, which is ultimately where the story starts in terms of water margin management. And it's in these areas that you want to identify the areas that you want to exclude livestock or at least have some control over their grazing activities. So grazing livestock is great. Grazing livestock in semi-natural habitats is absolutely ideal. That's what we want. We want an active managed landscape, but we want to be able to control some of the activities that they undertake that might be damaging to the landscape and to the water environment.
Hello, I'm Robert Ramsey. I work as an agricultural consultant for SEC Consulting based in the Ayr office at Auchincruive. Aside from that, I'm also farm with my family at Newlands, which is just at the top of the Irvine Valley. If anybody knows the area, it's where Loudon Hill is. And although we're in the upper course of the Irvine, we're probably about 2 miles from the source, but we're probably where most people think that the source of the Irvine is, so we're at the very top of the valley. Today we're talking about diffuse pollution and some work that we've been doing at home in terms of reducing diffuse pollution and improving biodiversity as well. 5 years ago we applied for funding through the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme to install some alternative watering and also to fence off some water margins. There was a few other areas that we looked at as well in terms of wader grazed grassland and mown grassland for wildlife. But the focus today is on the water environment. Our water margin story, the way our farm works, we've got a spring water supply. The tank is about a third of the way up the hill. Beyond that, above that, we couldn't actually get water to stock other than from rivers and burns. So we had quite a lot of cattle and sheep drinking directly out of the Irvine. At Loudon Hill, we're in quite a sensitive area. We're not in any SSSI there's no designations, but we do have a lot of visitors, a lot of people come to see what we do. And we've always been aware of our role in terms of extension, farmers' perception or the public's perception of farming. So we are basically farming in a fishbowl and we're aiming to do things right.
Largely when we're looking at management options that are beneficial to these habitats, we want to assess whether or not the banks are stable, whether or not there's any issues of erosion, whether or not there are any instances of diffuse pollution, and whether or not there's any point source pollution and how to mitigate against that. So creating a water margin and fencing off a water margin is often the easiest way to allow an area to regenerate itself naturally and to exclude the potential for things like livestock access and excessive erosion of banks.
By engaging with the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme, we were able to get some funding. We got all our key water margins were fenced off, and we installed 2 large solar-powered water pumps, which then allowed us to have a network of water troughs across the farm to reduce the level of diffuse pollution, reduce the poaching or eliminate the poaching of the water margin, but B's become more important to me, is develop a much better grazing infrastructure system. We've got a better network of grazing infrastructure that we can make a much better job of grass. As farmers now, we're being tasked with reducing carbon footprints as well as improving our biodiversity credentials and reducing pollution. To me now, what's becoming clear is those three things are actually very much linked. So by improving our diffuse pollution story, we've developed a better network of grazing.
There are other options available. So within the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme, there's a host of different options that are available to support sustainable land management, and there's a real focus on the water environment. So capital infrastructure and capital items are available, and we'll hear a little bit about alternative watering. That's one particular option. But we're here in Ayrshire, so we have a lot of dairy farmers, a lot of beef farmers, a lot of livestock orientated businesses. We really want to build on some of the processes that are important to them and important to the day-to-day running of their business. So within the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme, we have options for sustainable drainage around the farmsteading. There are options for creation of cow tracks, which can be particularly important for managing runoff onto fields and improving grassland productivity. There are options and support available for creation of hard standing where that's appropriate, concrete to manage the flow of water around the farmsteading. There are options available for alternative watering to provide water where you've previously excluded livestock from an area that they would otherwise have entered.
So over the years I've been working with Farming and Water Scotland. I've developed a real interest in alternative watering, and that's partly why we developed the system we did at home, was to really kind of ground-proof it and challenge what we were telling farmers. It's always nice for us to walk the talk. One thing that is amazingly, abundantly clear is when we speak to farmers through Farming and Water Scotland, everyone thinks about alternative watering. Everyone automatically thinks, what type of pump do I need? When we take the big step back and think about it, if we've got abstraction points that we can fit through a general binding rule, there's lots of good resource there in terms of how we actually draw water out a river compliantly. If we can do that, we can use gravity. So for many farms, gravity's on our side. The beauty with gravity is it doesn't run out of power. We don't need to worry about batteries. No one comes and steals it. The water's going to flow down the hill. So for a lot of people, and it sounds very simple, but when you apply it to your own farm, you don't often think about, why don't you go further up the hill, abstract the water from somewhere you wouldn't necessarily think was the right place to do it, but flow the water down the hill in a pipe. Once we do that, we've got a timeless system that will, other than frost, will work in any system that we've got.
Fundamentally, we're interested in what is the length and width of your water margin. Is the vegetation dense enough that you think there's a reasonable chance that any runoff, any pollutants can be captured and prevented from entering the watercourse itself? In terms of the species that we would hope to see, once an area is excluded from productive activity, and by that I mean production of a crop predominantly, or to support grazing livestock, we would hope to see species that are dormant within the seedbed become more prominent in the habitat. So we would expect to see a greater number of native species coming into this area over time. So species like yellow rattle, common knapweed, forget-me-nots, species like tormentil. These native species that can be particularly beneficial to pollinating insects, and also really important for small farmland birds and indirectly small mammals as well.
Our initial approach was to eliminate livestock poaching and was very much driven by diffuse pollution. What's really clear now is the biodiversity benefits. So what we've been able to see over the last 5 years is those habitats really developing, and I think there's a messaging piece here as well. Rewilding, we're either rewilding or we're farming. Well, actually what we've done in this case is taken a very small percentage of our farm and effectively rewilded it. So we've given it back to nature, and actually the place that's of the lowest value to me, i.e. the water edge, is probably of the highest nature value as well. So I think what we've created is something that is interesting, it's really beneficial, and actually something that I'm now quite proud of.
The reason the water environment's particularly important at farm level is farmers are under increasing pressure to make sure that they're farming productively and that they're producing food. At the same time, they're being asked to deal with the climate crisis and to tackle emissions and their carbon footprint. And to make matters more complicated, we've then got the biodiversity crisis. Within the farmed landscape, linear features offer the greatest potential to achieve that real win-win-win from a farming perspective, from a biodiversity perspective, and from a climate change perspective. We can implement productive, sustainable land practices without compromising on farm output, while building for nature and keeping our carbon footprint and our emissions low.
We initially started working with the farmers in the Ayr and the River Doon catchment around about 2011, and the reason for doing that is Ayr Bathing Beach was designated as one of our 57 priority catchments. It is also one of SEPA's 89 designated bathing waters. And the reason for why it was designated, the water quality itself was poor, and therefore could have an implication on human health and other issues. We were told that it was an accumulation of various different sources, so we're looking at fecal bacteria, fecal indicator organisms from both humans, livestock, and things like dogs and other ruminants. So we knew that there was diffuse sources of pollution coming down the watercourse, and we needed to engage with the land managers to see what was actually happening on the ground and to be able to give them some advice on how to become compliant with the rules and regulations that have been introduced to minimise the likelihood of diffuse pollution arising from agricultural activities. Within the two catchments there's probably about 350 to 400 farming units which we have engaged in and engaged with since 2011. Through that time we've seen various different issues that we've had to discuss with farmers to make them become more compliant or to get them to become more compliant. Just to give you an example, when we initially carried out our first visits to all farms within these two catchments, the compliance rate with the general binding rules, that's the lowest tier of legislation in Scotland, the compliance rate of agriculture was sitting about 34% with the environmental legislation. We've worked with the farmers in this catchment and they've worked with us, and we now in these two catchments have 100% compliance. Farmers are farming in line with the general binding rules and the Code of Good Agricultural Practice. So what have they done on the ground to actually get to this particular stage? Well, the sort of issues that we were coming across were insufficient slurry storage, livestock access to the water environment causing significant poaching, and cultivation of land too close to the river. All these activities do give rise to diffuse sources, small sources of diffuse pollution, which when accumulated together within a catchment have a significant impact on water quality and the bathing water downstream. So we've seen farmers increasing their slurry storage on farms over the last now 13 odd years. We've seen significant lengths of water courses being fenced off and farmers providing alternative watering solutions. And we've seen the cultivation of land move further away from the top of the bank or the watercourse itself. These have greatly reduced the impacts of pollution coming into the water environment, and we're now seeing a significant change in water quality down at our bathing water. We've moved the bathing water from being poor to good, and we're getting continuously good for the last 4 years at Ayr South. Which shows the significance of the work that has been done both by agriculture and also by Scottish Water in dealing with some of the sewage issues that we had in this particular catchment as well from the urban environment. The reason why we want to maintain good water quality in the bathing waters is we want them to be for the people of Scotland and for the tourists that actually appear in Ayrshire over the summer period. And one thing is, a lot of farmers have diversified over the years and they've bed and breakfast, so the tourists are coming there, so we want to maintain that coming into the area. But the reason for it is, if we have poor water quality, then it can impact on public health. And that means upset stomachs, it means vomiting and diarrhoea, and these things we want to try and minimise. And the work that we've been doing with the farmers, with Scottish Water, has significantly improved that water quality in Ayr Beach. When I first started working for what used to be called the Clyde River Purification Board, just before SEPA came into being, we had farm officers, and I was one of those farm officers that carried out the job. It was a difficult job because farmers thought of us as somebody worse than the taxman, and to be perfectly honest, really didn't want to engage with us. You could turn up on a farm and you'd sometimes see the farmer peering around the side of a fence to see who was actually there, and once he realised it was Clyde River or SEPA, he kind of stepped back. Those days have changed. It is now an area that we work in partnership. We have to work in partnership to achieve the goals that we want to achieve. SEPA wants to achieve good water quality goals, deal with climate change, but a lot of the issues and mitigation that farmers put on the ground leads to biodiversity benefits at the same time. There's wins across the board for each of Scottish Government's planned targets, and that's why we want to work together. But now the engagement is a lot more. Farmers are willing to basically pick up the phone, give us a call, describe the issues they actually have, and we will give them advice on how to overcome those particular issues. With regards to the compliance with the legislation, it might take them some way, but they might also need to engage with SRUC Consulting to actually go further to attain what they need to do. But it is a partnership approach. We can't do it without people working with us, and we can't do it with the straight regulatory tool. It has to be everybody working together for Scotland. Since we started working with farmers in the Ayr, Doon, River Irvine and Garnet catchments, we've also started building partnerships with other organisations, and one of those organisations has been SRUC. They have helped develop what we have the Farming and Water Scotland website and frequently asked questions. On that website you'll find the PEPFA code, which has just been rebranded and republished. You'll also find guidance documents on the general binding rules, how to become compliant, basic fact sheets, everything you need to know how to deal with compliant issues on farm from a water quality perspective. So if you've got a chance, look at that particular website, Farming and Water Scotland.